everyone, I'm here. Like I said, I will be showing you a few discoveries that Ron Wyatt did find, like the crossing of the Red Sea. We are talking about Noah's Ark and more. As I will show you with a few video clips, you will see the proof. Even Sodom and Gomorrah too were found. So I will show you the proof. You will be able to see for yourself. And here's the good news: you can go by yourself to these places and prove it for yourself, and you will find that these places are protected. To this day, the evidence has been preserved so that non-believers will be convinced. So now, why now that all these discoveries are so important? Listen, people, these discoveries are very important because they are proof. For those that think God doesn't exist, this will be the way for you to be convinced that truly God's word, the scriptures, they are true. Everything documented in scripture, when you read, you will find that they are exactly as it was documented. Do you see that? That is where now, this is the time we need really to turn to the true God who created heaven and earth and believe whatever account written in scripture. Don't use science to discredit. You will just dig a deeper grave for yourself. What you do is read and believe. All these false accounts and false religions, they don't have proof as the scriptures have proof. Do you see that? So let's start. This is where the children of Israel, they had to move. Back in the days, this is the Red Sea, and this too was called the Red Sea. Anyway, it's the whole thing, as you can see, the Red Sea, right? Now, science discredits the scriptures by saying they crossed somewhere here where it's shallow and it's called the Red Sea. The Red Sea. Do you know what reeds are? Let me show you image of reeds. That is what they think was the crossing where it was named the Red Sea. But that's not it. Red Sea. Not this one, but this Red Sea. And here it will be tough for you to find mountains covered on both sides. It's mountain. The only way forward is the sea. You won't find that blockade here. You won't find it. So let's go. This is where they crossed somewhere there. They came all the way and then they passed. Do you see this valley? This valley. Do you see that? All the way there, this valley. This is where the children of Israel passed, surrounded by mountains. They had nowhere else to go, and this is the only way to the area they did cross. There they came, and finally they came to the beach. Mountains behind them, as you can see, a mountain touch right there. It also just, but this generation currently they have managed to, you know what they do, they quarry and force their way through mountains to create a path. Now this is where the scriptures say they cried to Moses because they were stranded. They couldn't go back. They saw the dust in the mountains, from the mountains rising, and they knew that we are in trouble. And then this place is so wide and large that a nation of a people can be there. So this is where they crossed. This is the Red Sea. They crossed right somewhere there. From this beach, they crossed over, and in front of them is Mount Sinai right here. They crossed there, they came over to Mount Sinai. This is again a suspected camping area because it's the place which is wide and plain. You can see there is jagged, but here next to the mountain, let's go zoom in so that we can have the text and names to come in. There it is, Mount Sinai of Yahweh. Do you see that? So these mountains, as you will see in the video, they are talking about why they are darkened. You will see as the video runs, the video clips that I'm going to show you. So that's it for the Red Sea and where they camped. You see that? So from here, now they went all the way up to the promised land. You see the movement of, you can follow, you can go, you will find escort that can escort you from there all the way through that road, and probably if they will allow you, you can do dive and go see for yourself Pharaoh's wreckage. And the gold wheels, probably they belong to the Pharaoh and generals. You know what? You see that? Those, and you know, gold doesn't rust. So that's why to this day they say it's still down there. And you will say, why haven't they removed it? My dear, I believe this area is protected. Don't think you will just come over and try to lift those gold wheels from the bottom of the sea right here. You see, because now, as you can see, settlements have been created over this land where the children of Israel were stranded. So next, let me show you this website that will lead you easily to all these links. This one. So right here, Noah's Ark. You just click, it will take you exactly to the place, the Red Sea crossing. It will take you to the place where we just saw Mount Sinai. Alright, okay, let's check if I was describing the exact mountain. So let me just open this one. So it's opening. While it's opening, let me just show you a few things. This one is the one I don't understand why they didn't put it on the map. Pyramid. So you can click on all these and go and see these sites once you. In fact, you don't have to do like what I said, what I did there. You just click. For example, I click. It will open a new tab. There is the original, and there is the new tab where it's taking us. Now let's go and see Mount Sinai. So it's saying it's right here, not the place that I was. Oh, there it is. It's still the same place. But I don't know why Google Map is always like this. It doesn't show the exact place, because where this point is, that is not a mountain. I don't know. Maybe it's a mountain, but I don't. Let's keep zooming in. It's just that we cannot see where the land. Oh, let's do this. We are going to use terrain so that we see the elevation. Okay, we have another loading so slow. Let's go and see the pyramids. There are the pyramids. See that? So they're right there. So that's where the pyramids are. If you want to find them without using that link, which I will give below the video in description. So the mouth of the Nile, that's where the pyramids are. Then, as you know, Moses was put in the Nile River, all that. So there is the settlement right there, and there are the pyramids. So there are three of them. That is why I'm saying are not is, because there are three plural. So that's it. Let's see if this one has loaded. The terrain is not loading. It's not too much. But still, there it is. These are high. Oh, it's on there. But then why is... Do you see what I'm talking about? There is what it was supposed to have done. Get this red pointer and put it right here. Now there is the mountain they suspect should be the mountain that Moses climbed right there. Okay, that's it. Yeah. So it's rather closer to the very mountains I was talking about. It's these that are darkened. But that one, it's not showing. Oh, okay. Let's tune back to this one. This is the mountain right there. So I think that's it. Let me not talk too much because the videos too, they will be long. So I think that's it. Let's jump right in.
Exodus 14. At Etham the Lord said to Moses,
Tell the people of Israel to turn back and camp across from Pi-hahiroth near Baal-zephon, between Migdol and the Red Sea. The king will think they were afraid to cross the desert and that they are wandering around, trying to find another way to leave the country. I will make the king stubborn again, and he will try to catch you. Then I will destroy him and his army. People everywhere will praise me for my victory, and the Egyptians will know that I really am the Lord.
The Israelites obeyed the Lord and camped where he told them. When the king of Egypt heard that the Israelites had finally left, he and his officials changed their minds and said,
Look what we have done! We let them get away, and they will no longer be our slaves.
The king got his war chariot and army ready. He commanded his officers in charge of his 600 best chariots and all his other chariots to start after the Israelites. The Lord made the king so stubborn that he went after them, even though the Israelites proudly went on their way. But the king's horses and chariots and soldiers caught up with them while they were camping by the Red Sea near Pi-hahiroth and Baal-zephon. When the Israelites saw the king coming with his army, they were frightened and begged the Lord for help. They also complained to Moses.
Wasn't there enough room in Egypt to bury us? Is that why you brought us out here to die in the desert? Why did you bring us out of Egypt anyway? While we were there, didn't we tell you to leave us alone? We had rather be slaves in Egypt than die in this desert.
But Moses answered,
Don't be afraid. Be brave, and you will see the Lord save you today. These Egyptians will never bother you again. The Lord will fight for you, and you won't have to do a thing.
The Lord said to Moses,
Why do you keep calling out to me for help? Tell the Israelites to move forward. Then hold your walking stick over the sea. The water will open up and make a road where they can walk through on dry ground. I will make the Egyptians so stubborn that they will go after you. Then I will be praised because of what happens to the king and his chariots and cavalry. The Egyptians will know for sure that I am the Lord.
All this time, God's angel had gone ahead of Israel's army, but now he moved behind them. A large cloud had also gone ahead of them, but now it moved between the Egyptians and the Israelites. The cloud gave light to the Israelites, but made it dark for the Egyptians, and during the night they could not come any closer. Moses stretched his arm over the sea, and the Lord sent a strong east wind that blew all night, until there was dry land where the water had been. The sea opened up, and the Israelites walked through on dry land with a wall of water on each side. The Egyptian chariots and cavalry went after them. But before daylight, the Lord looked down at the Egyptian army from the fiery cloud and made them panic. Their chariot wheels got stuck, and it was hard for them to move. So the Egyptians said to one another,
"Let's leave these people alone. The Lord is on their side and is fighting against us."
The Lord told Moses,
Stretch your arm toward the sea. The water will cover the Egyptians and their cavalry and chariots.
Moses stretched out his arm, and at daybreak the water rushed toward the Egyptians. They tried to run away, but the Lord drowned them in the sea. The water came and covered the chariots, the cavalry, and the whole Egyptian army that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them was left alive. But the sea had made a wall of water on each side of the Israelites, so they walked through on dry land. On that day, when the Israelites saw the bodies of the Egyptians washed up on the shore, they knew that the Lord had saved them. Because of the mighty power he had used against the Egyptians, the Israelites worshipped him and trusted him and his servant Moses. Exodus 17. The Israelites left the desert and moved from one place to another each time the Lord ordered them to. Once they camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for them to drink. The people started complaining to Moses.
Give us some water!
Moses replied,
Why are you complaining to me and trying to put the Lord to the test?
But the people were thirsty and kept on complaining.
Moses, did you bring us out of Egypt just to let us and our families and our animals die of thirst?
Then Moses prayed to the Lord.
What am I going to do with these people? They're about to stone me to death.
The Lord answered,
Take some of the leaders with you and go ahead of the rest of the people. Also, take along the walking stick you used to strike the Nile River, and when you get to the rock at Mount Sinai, I will be there with you. Strike the rock with the stick, and water will pour out for the people to drink.
Moses did this while the leaders watched. The people had complained and tested the Lord by asking,
Is the Lord really with us?
So Moses named that place Massah, which means testing, and Meribah, which means complaining.
This is about what Ron Wyatt claimed to discover. And he claimed to discover many things. If you're familiar with him, you know that he's made some pretty big claims, and if you're not familiar with him, this might be a bit of a shock for you, because some of the things that he's found should be known in the entire world of Christianity. Some of the things that he's found has been verified by multiple witnesses, yet they're not talked about. I think the reason they're not discussed in the Christian circle and in Christian churches is, number one, we live in a Laodicean dead church age. It's lukewarm. It doesn't care about the Bible or God. Number two, I think one of the issues is that he is a Seventh-day Adventist, and that scares people away from bringing him up. That scares away pastors and teachers from even mentioning his name.
And the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. There remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left.
If you open your Bible to the very back where you have all of your maps, you're going to see that most Bibles at least have a path drawn out of the Exodus pathway from when the Israelites left Egypt from slavery, when they were delivered by God through the Red Sea and then all the way to Mount Sinai and through the wilderness. Most Bibles will have a map that depict the pathway and the route that they took. You can throw that map in the trash. That's not the actual route. Ron Wyatt found the actual Red Sea crossing.
When Ron Wyatt was at this spot in 1978, he decided to inspect the waters here for any evidence that may have been left behind from approximately 20,000 chariots, plus the horses, horsemen, and foot soldiers. What he found has been confirmed by others.
Scientists always kept trying to say that they crossed in the Sea of Reeds, which was ankle deep at a certain time of year and stuff. And Dad wanted to prove that it was a biblical miracle. And so he tried to trace their steps from Egypt. And basically he did. He got an airplane and he had this guy named Moses, actually. Yeah. This is no lie. We hired a pilot in Eilat and his name was Moses, and he flew us up and down through there, and Dad told him what we're looking for. We're looking for a valley that goes all the way through the mountains from here, from the Sinai Peninsula to here. And the guy said, oh yeah, there is one. And back then there wasn't a road even down it, but now they have a road down there. All the way through, yeah. It keeps washing out all the time.
There has never been any real convincing evidence, nothing found, nor archaeological evidence found by Cairo, Egypt, that would support the fact that the Israelites crossed there. There has been, however, much evidence found, archaeological evidence, to show that the crossing was here and that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia.
So basically what we have here is the traditional Exodus route from Goshen, where the Israelites were in Egypt. They came out of Goshen and then they crossed over around here somewhere, and this is where the traditional crossing of the Red Sea is. It's really sad because they're basically saying that Egypt's chariots got drowned in this really shallow marsh-like area. They will keep the traditional site of Mount Sinai and they'll put it here not because of evidence they found, but because Constantine's mother said this was Mount Sinai. So the scholars, with all their wisdom, go along with Constantine's mother, and in order to do that, they got to put the Red Sea crossing over here, because it wouldn't make sense over there. And they also say that this is the real Red Sea crossing because in the Hebrew, it's the Sea of Reeds, the Reed Sea. But if you actually look into it in other places in the Bible, it describes this area right here as the Red Sea as well. So this is also the Red Sea in the Bible. So anyways, the actual Red Sea crossing, they ended up at this beach right here, and then they crossed right here. So the actual Mount Sinai is in Arabia. According to scholars, it's where Constantine's mother said it was. But according to Paul, the apostle, it's in Arabia. And that's where it actually is, and we'll look at that next. But here's where the actual Red Sea crossing is. The actual route starts here, goes down through here, and then they get entangled in the wilderness. And let me see if I have a map of that. Yeah, so as you can see, there's like this windy valley. And that's where Pharaoh realized they would be entangled in the wilderness. And then when it pursued them, and they came out at the beach here. And this is where they actually crossed. There's another bird's eye view of the beach. And as you can see, all of Israel would fit onto this area of land while God protected them with a pillar of fire, cutting off Pharaoh's army coming from behind. They're literally finding chariot wheels. This is all found in that Red Sea area.
Egyptian chariots were known to use metal hubs in the center of the wheels. Using metal detectors, divers have found metal in the raised hubs that are now covered in coral.
So when you dive with underwater metal detector, you can go over all the corals and you don't get any reading. And then when you go over obviously metal or iron or whatever, you do get a reading. So that's the way you know that if you've got a wheel shape and you get a strong metal reading from it, then that would be the difference between just a round coral and something that could potentially be a chariot wheel. So when you compare this particular four-spoked hub to the hubs that you see in the Egyptian Museum, it looks exactly the same, and there's metal where you'd expect to see it.
Here we see another four-spoked chariot wheel with one spoke missing and a center-raised hub. The coral here has preserved the chariot parts by retaining the man-made structure, even after the wood has disappeared. Here we see another wheel suspended on its axle, standing at attention. It has 6 spokes and a raised center hub. Ron Wyatt made many dives here and located many artifacts.
That thing in the middle is like the hub of the wheel, and then it's almost like a cross of coral. The wood rotted away. The metal would still be there with coral around it. But as you can see, I mean, that's just not a natural coral formation. There shouldn't be any coral at all in this area because there's nothing for it to grow on. But if there was a bunch of chariots down there rotting away, coral would definitely be growing on them. So, as you can see, I mean, that's clearly a chariot wheel. This is pretty clearly a chariot wheel. On the right side is giving you like an illustration, but I mean, you can even without the illustration, you can see. I mean, it just gets more and more obvious. Like, what is that coral doing? That's obviously something sticking out like an axle. That's just not normal. I mean, come on. Like, what do you think that is? There's also a gold one found, and I mean, if you don't think that's a chariot wheel, I don't know what to tell you. That's a chariot wheel.
The premier find here at the crossing site is this gold veneer that was left behind from a four-spoke chariot wheel. The Bible tells us there were 600 choice chariots used in the chase of the children of Israel. This artifact was left behind at a depth of 200 feet. Since specialized equipment would be necessary to raise it to the surface, today it is still in the location where it was found.
Because when Dad first did the cameras, I don't think we even had the scuba gear yet, did we? I think we were just
No, the first trip we didn't really find anything, except we found the spot where we thought that it was.
But when we actually did go scuba diving, Dad bought 2 little underwater Kodak cameras, and that's what the underwater pictures were taken with. I took a picture of 3 different wheels. The golden chariot wheel picture got drowned in one of the cameras, and the other camera had a bunch of chariot wheels but not the gold one.
Me and Ronnie went down and touched.
We touched the gold chariot wheel. Somewhere around 180 feet.
Yeah, it was
right around there.
Like Ronnie said earlier, we were swimming about 35 feet where you can stay all day, whatever, 32 feet. So we were up there swimming around, and if we saw anything, we'd go down.
On a number of trips, we brought metal detectors to Nueva, and these reveal that inside the coral there is metal that would be consistent with what we'd expect from finding remains of the Egyptian army. Now, some people have asked, well, if that's the case, why don't you just bring up artifacts, some of this coral that contains this metal? There's a very simple reason for that. As you can see on the sign, it's strictly forbidden to touch or remove any coral in the Red Sea. So for us to do so would be violating Egyptian law.
Further south in the Gulf of Aqaba, you can see that things have been washed up on the land, like sea stars, corals, and other things twisted into one another, like a disastrous whatever, like a washing machine has been treating the material, so to speak. And also in that kind of material we can find bronze. And bronze is a metal that's made by humans, so it's not a natural one.
You can see how rugged these mountains are. And much of the Gulf of Aqaba is just as rugged underwater. So if God had parted the water with the underground terrain looking like this, it would have been impassable.
There are 2,000-meter high mountains around the Gulf of Aqaba. There are 2,000-meter deep waters in the deepest section. Huge falls from the peaks to the bottom. You can ask the question, how can we cross the seabed? I mean, we just take away the water. We don't talk about the water. But how can you just cross? First, you could not have any mud on the seabed. You need a solid ground. Horses should be able, full speed, going across that material, whatever the material is. In the middle of the Gulf Aqaba, there is a shallow section, relatively speaking, shallow. And the interesting thing is that the downhill slope and then the uphill slope on the other side is within the criteria for wheelchairs in the US. You know, it can't be too much uphill or downhill with a wheelchair because it's too much work, so to speak. So the downhill slope and the uphill slope is within these limits. That's a scientific statement.
This is the Wadi Watiya. This is the canyon that connects the Sinai Desert to the Red Sea. And you can see these very rugged mountains. If you're walking down this canyon, you've got to follow it all the way. You can't go left or right. We find in Exodus chapter 14, verse 3, a description where Pharaoh would say, the children of Israel are entangled in the land, the wilderness has shut them in. That's a perfect description of this wadi leading down to the Red Sea. Finally, after walking about 30 kilometers through this wadi, they come to the Red Sea. You can see behind us the Gulf of Aqaba, and behind that, the mountains of Midian. Josephus described the mountains around the Red Sea crossing site as impassable by reason of their roughness. You can see these mountains here around Nuweiba Beach are extremely rough. You can see the loose rock, the shingle, very hard to climb and very dry and barren. Had the Egyptians attacked the Hebrews at the Red Sea crossing site and they'd scattered through these mountains, it would have been an absolute disaster for the Israelites.
The interesting thing is that the gravel at the location in the midsection of the Gulf Aqaba, since it's shallow there, the tidal current goes back and forth and keep this clean. And immediately when you take away the water, it's like concrete. It's very, very solid. So no problem with the horses, no problem with the chariots, no problems with the oxen and the oxen chariots and so forth. Just good.
Since there are chariot parts on this side of the Red Sea crossing, could there be other chariot parts on the other side of the Gulf, showing a continuation of artifacts? On the shore opposite of Nuweiba, inspection of the seafloor in Saudi Arabia has also been conducted to see if chariot parts can be found on this side of the Red Sea crossing. While investigating the Saudi Arabian waters, Viveka Pontian found this beautiful round chariot wheel specimen with a raised center hub. This is confirmation of the chariot parts continuing to the other side of the crossing site, opposite Nuweiba.
They also found a human femur bone, possibly a human rib cage, which is really hard to see, and a horse hoof. Horses are not on the Sinai Peninsula today, so okay then, where did that come from? Why is that in the Red Sea crossing? So I think there's enough evidence here to easily conclude that this is the actual Red Sea crossing. And as we'll see in a moment here, this is definitely the Red Sea crossing because Mount Sinai is on the other side of it.
and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. And when the voice of the trumpet sounded long, and waxed louder and louder, Moses spake, and God answered him by a voice. And the Lord came down upon Mount Sinai on the top of the mount.
That time I have vacation to come to Korea. When I see my father, he said, look, I have been to pilgrim, but why is very big difference, the Bible and Sinai Mount? And then I said, you are the elder in the church. How you say like that? Don't talk like this. He said, no, it's something different. And then he gave to me the videotapes. And then when I see this showing about Ron Wyatt, he said he had been to the northern part of the Saudi Arabia in Midian wilderness. Then he said Mount Sinai is there. So I was very much strange because since I was a child, I read so many times the books. But I'm just reading the book, but never match on the map with the Bible.
The tradition that the mountain in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula is Mount Sinai only dates back to the 4th century AD. New research based on Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sources indicate that there is a tradition that is 600 years older, and according to that tradition, Mount Sinai is in northwest Saudi Arabia. This other tradition points to Jabal Makla, a peak on the mountain range known as Jebel al-Lawz, as the true Mountain of Moses. Several historical sources, including Josephus, recorded that Mount Sinai is the highest mountain near a city that is today called Al-Bad. Locals refer to Jabal Makla as Jebel Musa, the Mountain of Moses.
So you call this one Jebel Musa?
Jebel Musa.
One of the distinguishing features of this mountain is the blackened top that you can see right behind me. The Bible says that God descended upon Mount Sinai as a fire.
The blackened peaks stick out from the surrounding areas, and the rocks are only black from the outside. Researchers disagree as to whether the blackened rocks are actual evidence of God descending upon the mountain as a fire like the Bible says, or whether it's natural volcanic rock. A small handful of Americans tried to sneak into this area in the late 1970s and the 1980s. They were arrested, and their photos and videos were confiscated by the Saudi police. Their evidence was lost.
Mount Sinai was first discovered in 1984 by Ron Wyatt and his sons, who walked across the border into Saudi Arabia without a visa in order to document the evidence here. After seeing the mountain, he and his sons were captured and were accused of espionage. They spent 78 days in prison, awaiting execution, before they were finally released.
After Ron Wyatt was there, the Saudi government, they know that this place is important. And also they have a special investigation all around the mountains. They found so many stone structures and many ancient rock inscriptions. The local peoples, they call it the Jabal Lawz. Jabal Lawz, Jabal means Arabic is mountains, and Lawz means the almond. It's something strange, Arabic and Hebrew name is same, Lawz. But in Saudi Arabia, actually it's not growing the almond tree, except these mountains. God ordered to Moses, the Oholiab and Bezalel, 2 persons, giving them the knowledge to make menorah by the gold. How they made menorah? 3 branch and other side 3 branch. It's like almond flour.
And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold, 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick.
Then 12 tribes have problems that times. Moses ordered to every tribe to the staff, put the name of the tribe, and then they put in the ark. Morning times, found out the Aaron, his staff, almond tree and almond flower was there.
And take of every one of them a rod, write thou every man's name upon his rod. And thou shalt lay them up in the tabernacle of the congregation before the testimony, where I will meet with you. And it shall come to pass that the man's rod whom I shall choose shall blossom. And it came to pass that on the morrow Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron for the house of Levi was budded, and brought forth buds, and bloomed blossoms, and yielded almonds.
How to match this mountain name and this almond? But also, why is matching the Jabal Luz and the Hebrew and Arab is same word, same meaning?
Well, we've made it not to the summit yet. We're at about 6,400 feet in elevation. As you look behind me, you can see the big plain that the Israelites camped in front of the mountain. And just right down where we're standing, you can see the plateau where definitely 70 plus people could have sat and ate with God. Remember, Moses went up there with the elders of Israel. And right in front of me is the Blackened Peak. We're going to summit that today.
I understand from their video, they said where the black begins, it's very distinct. It's a clear change from normal rock to black, like it's a boundary, a very clear boundary. Did you found that too?
Yeah. I go to on the back side. I come to there. But this one, the like stone is melted. But some of them, they arguing, said, oh, this one volcanic stone. But volcanic stone, if you broke inside, also is black. Yes. But this one, only the outside is blackened. 20 to 30% from the top of the mountain is blackened. But it's go down is normal. Yeah, it's not like a volcanic stone. Different, very big different volcanic stone.
Okay, we are at the line where the stone changes color between the black stone and the white, pink, whatever you want to call it, granite. And here's the blackened boulder. And we're just looking at it, and if you pull off this piece, inside it's a different color. That's kind of pinkish, but the outside is black.
Now the amount of evidence around Mount Sinai here, which today is called Jabal Machlah, reveals this place is indeed the true Mount Sinai. It is all quite convincing, so let's now look at all of the evidence here at this Mount Sinai, which is known again as Jabal Machlah. First of all, the Bible states that the Israelites camped at the base of Mount Sinai for around a year. Interestingly, at the base of this mountain here is a large flat area where the Israelites could have camped. It is huge in size and had streams of water and pasture land for their livestock to graze. Also, the climate was perfect as it is higher in elevation, so it's not hot in the summer and it's comfortable in the winter. Next, Exodus 19:18 states that Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. The top of these mountains are dark, showing signs of burnt marks. The outer parts of the rocks are black, but on the inside they are brownish in color. And you can see here, there's been some rocks that have been chipped away, and you can see that on the outside they're black, and on the inside they are brown. This seems to be more evidence that this mountain and the surrounding mountains close by were covered with fire and smoke. Now from Mount Sinai, God gave the 10 Commandments to the nation of Israel and supernaturally wrote them on tablets of stone with his own finger. This was an earth-shattering event. Scripture says the mountain was on fire for 6 days and appeared as if it was going to be consumed. And the Israelites who saw this were terrified as they beheld everything that took place. The Bible also speaks about how Moses and 70 elders of Israel went up the mountain to worship God. The elders were to stay at a distance from Moses and could only go part way up. Interestingly, there is a natural plateau part way up the mountain where this event could have happened. Another piece of strong evidence is that at the base of this mountain, an altar has been discovered. This would match what Scripture states in Exodus 24:4 and 5. And Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Then he got up early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 memorial stones for the 12 tribes of Israel. And he sent young men of the tribes of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Now at the very base of this mountain are extensive remains of an altar and a complete system for animal sacrifice. There are corrals where the animals would have been kept and an altar at the front of it. There have also been discovered animal bones here underground. Scripture also refers to 12 memorial stones or pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. Interestingly, there are stones by this altar that perfectly match the biblical record. The Saudi locals say that in the past, these stones were much more evident and could be seen much more clearer, and that the platform was more intact as well. Also, Ron Wyatt documents having found one of the pillars that had Hebrew writings on it. It's quite fascinating that everything here matches perfectly the biblical account of this event. Near the altar of Moses and the 12 pillars, Moses read to the Israelites the Book of the Covenant, and they agreed to it. This means that Moses probably had a spot right above the altar that served as a stage to address the Israelites. Now, just above the altar of Moses is a large platform from where Moses could have easily spoken to the Israelites when the covenant was made. It provides a natural place from which to speak, and the Saudi locals talk about how sound travels here like a natural amphitheater. Another fascinating discovery at the base of this mountain is the altar upon which Aaron set the golden calf, and all Israel worshipped before it. On the top of these rocks is the main rock that shows a flat spot where the golden calf might have been placed for all Israel to see. Below the rocks is where Aaron would have made an altar to this golden calf. Now Exodus 32 provides all the details. It says, "Now when the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, the people assembled about Aaron and said to him, 'Come, make us a god who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him.' Aaron said to them, 'Tear off the gold rings which are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me.' Then all the people tore off the gold rings which were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a golden calf, or a molten calf. And they said, 'This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt.' Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it." So Moses was on top of Mount Sinai for 40 days, and this event happened while Moses was away. Now, interestingly, this golden calf was a representation of the Egyptian false god Hathor. It was one of Egypt's main gods. You can see images of this false god that look very similar to the paintings on these rocks here. There are also many other inscriptions on these rocks as well. Now, worship of this false god Hathor consisted of dancing, drums, and sexual promiscuity, and this is exactly what the Israelites were doing while Moses was away. This altar, interestingly, is fenced and gated like other archaeological sites at the base of this mountain by the Saudi government. However, over the past several years, the Saudi government has opened up these sites to tourists, and you can now go there easily and see these places for yourself. Additionally, many artifacts and discoveries have been found in this area that give great evidence that this mountain is indeed the true Mount Sinai. Now, after the golden calf incident, when Moses returns back to the base of the mountain, it says in Exodus 32:20, what Moses did with this golden calf. It says, "Then he took the calf which they had made and completely burned it with fire and ground it to powder and scattered it over the surface of the water and made the sons of Israel drink it." At the base of this mountain there is a stream which forms a small lake. So this place provides the water that would have been necessary for this event to have happened here. There are also around this small lake a number of wells that have been discovered as well. So this area was a main water source. A stream came down from the mountain here, and it was a main water source. There was another stream as well just to the north. So there was plenty of water in this area for these events to take place and for the nation of Israel to have used during their time at the base of Mount Sinai. Also, after the golden calf ordeal, God ordered the Levites to kill those who had been involved in the worship of the golden calf. In Exodus 32:28, we see that 3,000 died as a result. Now, with this being the case, there should be a mass graveyard site close by to this area. Interestingly, we find a site about 4 to 5 miles north that fits exactly this biblical event. There are thousands of standing stones that appear to have been used as grave markers in this flat plain. This area is also fenced off by the Saudi government and declared as an archaeological site. Also, close by to this mountain, there has been found a menorah painting which gives evidence that the Israelites were in this area.
What I know, the oldest menorah was AD 70. Roman Titus, he took to the Rome, After that, they don't found the oldest menorah up to today. But what I found, this menorah inscriptions is very old. Why? Around this menorah inscriptions, there is so many old letter was there. This old letter is very similar Hebrew letters, and call it maybe Talmudic. Talmudic, it means BC 13 to BC 15. It's almost Exodus times. This letter with menorah together here. So let me tell you, that place is Arabia. That place, why there is the Jewish mark on it there. And that place, why all the Hebrew letter is there.
Unfortunately, this painting has been chiseled away in recent years, but older photos and documentation clearly prove its existence, and even what has been chiseled away shows the outline of a menorah. We also know that God gave to Moses, while they were at the base of Mount Sinai for about a year here, the design of the tabernacle, and that it was erected at the base of the mountain. Now, we don't have any evidence of this tabernacle as being here, as it was mobile in nature. However, by taking into consideration the location of the mountain and the lay of the land, there is a place here that would be the natural location for it to be. It is flat, close by to the altar of Moses, and at the base of the mountain. Now, the Bible mentions how the prophet Elijah traveled to Mount Sinai and stayed in a cave there after his powerful confrontation with the 850 false prophets of Baal and Asherah on Mount Carmel, as found in 1 Kings 19. At this confrontation, supernatural fire came down from the Lord and consumed the altar and everything on it. Then Elijah traveled to Mount Sinai and stayed in a cave. At this cave on Mount Sinai, God spoke to Elijah and strengthened him. Interestingly, on the side of this believed Mount Sinai is a large cave that perfectly matches Scripture and where Elijah could have stayed. This cave is known as the Cave of Elijah. It is also the only large cave in this area of mountains. There are also many other evidences that can be found around Mount Sinai that support it as the true location of Mount Sinai. Now it says in Exodus 15, it says, "Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 date palms, and they camped there beside the waters." And you can see in this video, this place has been found. This very place that it talks about has been found, and it supports the biblical text. To this day, there are many palm trees and exactly 12 wells here. This would have provided water and met all the needs of the Israelites. Here you can see this area with the palm trees and some of the wells. The Saudi locals in the area point out that this is Elim and has been known by this name as long as they can remember. After this, it says in Exodus 17, "Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin, according to the command of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." And here is where Moses struck the rock, and water gushed out and came out from this rock. Now this rock that Moses struck and God split in two is believed to have been found and is a perfect match with the biblical account. It is massive in size and sits upon a small hill. It's also located in a large valley where the Israelites could have camped and can be seen from a long distance away. It shows water grooves in it where massive amounts of water ran down from it. And you can see this rock and the water channels and grooves that were made when the water gushed out from it. Now God confirms this in Isaiah 28:21. It says, "They did not thirst when he led them through the deserts. He made the water flow out of the rock for them. He split the rock and the water gushed out." And this is exactly what we see here at this large, massive rock at Rephidim. And then it says in Psalm 78, it says, "He split the rocks in the wilderness and gave them abundant drink like the ocean depths. He brought forth streams also from the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers." Now this rock from which the water flowed here at Rephidim is also referred to as the rock of Horeb because it is close by to Mount Sinai, also known as Mount Horeb. Also, while at Rephidim, the Amalekites came and fought against the Israelites. Exodus 17:8 says that, "Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim." The Amalekites were descendants of Esau and were a people who lived south of the Dead Sea region. God supernaturally gave the Israelites victory as Moses held up his arms. When his arms got tired from being outstretched, then Aaron and Hur helped him hold up his arms. And by doing so, the Israelites were victorious over the Amalekites. Also, right by this massive rock at Rephidim, you can see what appears to be an altar that Moses erected after defeating the Amalekites and named it Jehovah Nissi, which means in Hebrew, "The Lord is our banner." This altar is located right beside the rock Moses struck where the water gushed out for the Israelites to drink. Now there are also some other amazing discoveries in this area that are fascinating to see and give more evidence that this area was traversed by the Israelites. Ryan Morrow, who recently visited this area and produced an excellent documentary called Finding the Mountain of Moses, the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, says some of the following information. He says the name of Rephidim means place of rest. Hebrew inscriptions that have been found in this area have been interpreted to say place of rest, the definition of Rephidim. Closer to the mountain, inscriptions have been found that Dr. Miles Jones, a scholar of ancient Hebrew, believes are talking about the battle with the Amalekites. He says one of the inscriptions refers to the death of an Amalekite. Nearby, there are two inscriptions that Dr. Jones believes are marking where a Hebrew mother and daughter died.
To go to the Jabal Luz. He said, "No, don't go there. There is military already there. If you go there, they will catch you." I said, "No problem, let's go there." And they said, No. He offered to me 200 riyal. Saudi 200 riyal, it means you can buy one piece of gold. And I said, "Okay, no problem, I will give you the 200 riyal. But you should take me to go to Jabal Luz." He said, "Okay, I will go. Let's go." And then he was driving in front of me. I'm following him, And then after that, I think around 15 to 20 minutes, he said that this one is Jabal Luz. When I look, it's nothing there. I said, "No, this one is not Jabal Luz." He said to me, "If you pay 100 riyal more, I will bring to you to the Jabal Luz." It's an Arab businessman. Then suddenly I said to him, "Look, we have a contract 200 riyal. If you want 100 riyal more, it means you broke our contract. go to your house. I go to myself. If I found gold, I will not give it to you, anything to you. He said, no, let's go. But that times, I drive myself because I know maybe way to, because already we know the directions, you know. So I'm following my way. And I will tell you, Saudi, the skies, there is no cloud because no rain, you know. But I found the big black cloud is touched the top of the mountains. So I thought maybe if I go that place will be Jabal Luz. We are the far away, but we know the direction because it's like a signal, you know. So I'm following, but the crowd is always moving, depends on the wind, you know. But this one is not moved. He touched the top of the mountain and slowly it's coming down. It's like with the cloud pillar, you know. And then I follow. The last moment when I arrived, that mountain was Jabal Luz.
Wow. So that's how you found it, like God put a cloud there.
Yeah. And then I stopped there. When I come out, suddenly on my back sunshine, but this black cloud completely covered all around the mountains. From inside started lighting, tendering, like God appeared 3,500 years before.
Wow.
I was afraid, really.
This is your first trip there?
Yeah, first trips. And suddenly I fell down. I started to pray to God. You know, the raindrop on my body. And you know, the tender, the sound inside the mountain. Huge. You feel like earthquake also shaking the ground. I was afraid that some stone is falling down from the mountain. And tendering and writing. After that, I was afraid, you know, pray to the God, please, we are the sin, you know. You know, the more than 50 years old, you know, what I did before. So I started to think about everything is pull it out to God. And then all my family afraid to inside the car. And the Bedouin also, they afraid in the car. I pray and pray. And suddenly I feel something, you know, very quiet. When I look, and the whole cloud is gone, suddenly, and sunshine again. And Bedouin, he come to me, hey. I say, why? Maybe the writing, you ever happen something like this? And then I asked him, did you see something like this happen? He said, he's almost 80 years old. He said, I never seen all my life. And this time is not the raining season. Why something happened like this? I say, I don't know.
If this is Mount Sinai, this is very significant.
Mm-hmm.
So why hasn't the archaeologists gone there and investigated this?
No one can enter that place, archaeological area, or no one can excavations. So up to today, even there is, looks like a Bible, the stone structure is there, and 12 stone pillar is there, and Eliad cave is there. Everything is there. What is written like Bibles, 100% is there. But now the Islam people occupied here. So who can go inside? Nobody can inside. Since AD 610, when Islamic occupied in this area, you cannot go inside. You want to go, but you cannot. You try to apply the official visa for the excavation in this place. You think they will release visa to you? No. If the Mount Sinai was open place, like Egypt, or if the Mount Sinai was in the America, or somewhere, it will be destroyed everything, like the Jerusalems. But this one, 3,500 years, he protect himself. So many tribes, so many generations, and come and go, but he keep it long time in the desert. Nowadays, last day before the Jesus coming, very few selection people bring to show to this place, to show them where is the real Mount Sinai. Let me tell you, Jesus' times, he did a lot of things Sometimes you don't know how to work, but the Jesus, when he wake up, he suddenly work. The blind, he open eyes. Dumb, he can talk. Like Lazarus, he was after die 3 days already start smelling his body, but he come out, he alive. But you think that times all the people they believe that Jesus? No. Who believe? Weakness peoples. Child. No power peoples.
For more than 20 years, divers and explorers from 3 continents, each intrigued by clues linking the Gulf of Aqaba and the biblical Yam Suf, have come to Nuweiba Beach seeking possible evidence of an Israelite crossing. Their search focused on the 600 chariots the Bible says were destroyed in the Red Sea. Inscriptions thousands of years old, and the few chariots recovered from ancient tombs reveal much about the construction of these legendary vehicles of war. Could any of them actually be found on the seafloor off the Nuweiba Peninsula?
The first time I came to Nuweiba, the purpose was to verify, to document, and to establish hypotheses that this could be a link in the Exodus pathway.
Based on his analysis of documentary evidence, Leonard Moeller had long suspected the Aqaba coast as the probable location of the Red Sea crossing. In 1997, he heard reports from other divers who claimed to have found unusual coral structures, some resembling the shapes of chariot wheels. Moeller decided to investigate these claims for himself.
The first time I was diving there, of course, we were then looking for possible artifacts. And I had seen on some pictures what we could look for. I was skeptical and excited, because if this is the place for the crossing, then of course that's a big thing. So I was excited about that. But I was also skeptical because 3,500 years, that's a long time. But if Nuweiba is the crossing site, then of course you would expect to find remains of the Egyptian army.
Like others who had explored Nuweiba before him, Moeller immediately recognized the difficulty of this search.
If we assume that a number of artifacts were spread out on the seabed, sooner or later corals would start to grow on them. And of course, if you have a number of layers of coral growing on something, it's very hard to distinguish the structure that was there from the very beginning.
Though the coral complicates any search here, it may have been instrumental in preserving the shapes of ancient artifacts. For coral is a living organism that will not begin to grow on a foundation of sand or silt. Instead, it must first attach itself to a solid object, where it will sometimes conform to the shape of its host.
So for instance, if it would grow on a wooden artifact, the wood would normally disappear in the seawaters after a time. But if you have corals growing on the wooden artifact, the coral could have the shape of the wooden artifact. And then the corals would consume the wooden material over periods of time, but still keep the shape of the wooden artifacts.
During the course of his explorations, Moeller observed that the pattern of coral growth at Nuweiba differed from other parts of the Gulf. Unlike the coral at the northern and southern ends of Aqaba, which often forms large, dense reefs, some covering many acres, the formations at Nuweiba Beach are generally smaller and scattered randomly across the seafloor. divers familiar with the area have compared the distribution of coral here to a junkyard and the aftermath of a disaster. This description is fitting, and among the strange formations in these waters, many display features indicative of human engineering.
When we dive and when we film at the Nuweiba location, we look for certain structures, and you try to look for 90-degree angles or circular objects, wheel-like structures. So that is what you scan for, so to speak, when you dive. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at Nuweiba, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the sea floor. A slender, table-like structure, sometimes standing on end, with a coral-encrusted base, a straight shaft, and a circular top.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
After reviewing photographic evidence and making several dives of his own, Moeller concluded that a more systematic investigation of the Nuweiba seafloor was warranted. He realized that the limited diving time afforded by scuba equipment would never allow an extensive search of the area. A higher level of technology was necessary, and in the spring of 2000, the team lowered a robotic camera into these waters for the first time.
This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
Controlled from the ship, the camera was maneuvered across the seafloor, transmitting video images for study and evaluation.
We have been down to some 80-90 meters, so we can go deeper down that we can't do with ordinary diving, and we can be down as long as we like.
As in his previous searches at Nuweiba, Moeller scrutinized the coral for specific shapes.
We can see that because it's a 90-degree angle. You see the seabed here, there are some structures that are just a little bit above the surface of the seabed. They have a cross-like appearance, it's 90-degree angles, and there's a hole in the middle.
So the hub would be here?
Possibly a hub there, yeah. And the wheel would be a circle around.
This would be the rim of the wheel here. Okay. So this could be a spoke here, possibly?
Yeah,
possibly a spoke?
Yeah.
What would the diameter of that rim be?
That's a good question, but we would expect it to be about 1 meter, about 3 feet wide.
Okay.
In diameter.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Moeller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts, fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with a remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. And this could be the outer rim of a wheel going around like
The abundance of these unusual coral structures was even more apparent when tapes of the expedition were carefully scrutinized during the months following the search at Nuweiba.
Standing on the seabed. When you sit and look at these films that has been taken by the remote camera, you see all these strange artifacts or coral growth on some artifacts or structures that appear repeatedly, time after time, at different locations at this spot. And you can sit there and think, well, what is this? This doesn't look like normal coral growth. And it is amazing to see that so many things and such large areas down there that are like a man-made structure.
From the middle of the beach, we can see the opening of Pi-Hahiroth in the distance, but we head south in order to locate an amazing marker here at the beach. Near the road, we see this large pillar. 78 during his first visit to this beach. It had fallen down and was lying in the edge of the water, but today it is about 500 feet from the sea and has been set in concrete. Features of the red granite pillar include the fact that it is of Phoenician or Hebrew design and is 3,000 years old. It was placed here for a reason, to mark the location of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. This pillar is even mentioned in the Bible, a pillar to the Lord at its, Egypt's border. At the south end of the beach is where we can see the pillar. A matching column on the other side of the Gulf in Saudi Arabia was found by Ron Wyatt in 1984 and was shown to Saudi authorities. On the Saudi pillar were Hebrew inscriptions which included the words Pharaoh, Mizraim or Egypt, Moses, death, water, Yahweh, Solomon, and Edom. The inscriptions on this column have been removed, since the Egyptians living here were not excited about a Hebrew celebration marker, located in their own backyard. Using Google Earth, one can zoom in on the beach here and spot the pillar standing near the road. This is an exciting use of technology to see the Bible come alive. A short distance downhill, we come to the edge of the water where a wonderful miracle took place, where the Lord provided protection to his people, even though they were angry and complaining. Are you not the one who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? For centuries, this beach has been named for the crossing of the Red Sea at this exact spot. On Google Earth, we can see the name Nuweiba at this point on the beach. This older, detailed map reveals to us the complete name of the beach. Nuweiba is short for Nuweiba al-Muzayina. The name on this beach, Nuweiba al-Muzayina, gives us confirmation that we are in the correct location. The translation of that name means, Waters of Moses Open. This is where the waters opened by the hand of God. The Lord demonstrated to his people that he would be their protector. We have confirmation that we are at the correct location. Moses once stood here with the children of Israel, and the water was opened before them by the hand of God. An amazing testimony of truth. Depth charts of the Gulf of Aqaba show the Eilat Deep to the north and the Aragonese Deep to the south. Between these two deep areas is a path through the sea. When Ron Wyatt was at this spot in 1978, he decided to inspect the waters here for any evidence that may have been left behind from approximately 20,000 chariots, plus the horses, horsemen, and foot soldiers. What he found has been confirmed by others. The water is very clear, with high visibility. Investigations have revealed artifacts which confirm our previous conclusions about the site. The seafloor is smooth and contains gradual contours. Our first artifact to inspect is this chariot wheel that still has 3 of its 4 spokes, plus the hub is extending upward. We see 90-degree angles here, which are a sign of man-made structure. The Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels. The chariot wheel with 6 spokes was the most widely used by the Egyptians. Egyptian chariots were known to use metal hubs in the center of the wheels. Using metal detectors, divers have found metal in the raised hubs that are now covered in coral. Here we see another 4-spoked chariot wheel with 1 spoke missing and a center raised hub. The coral here has preserved the chariot parts by retaining the man-made structure, even after the wood has disappeared. Here we see another wheel suspended on its axle, standing at attention. It has 6 spokes and a raised center hub. Ron Wyatt made many dives here and located many artifacts. This could have once been a chariot cab. This appears to be another round chariot wheel. Horse remains have also been found here, such as this shrunken hoof. Horses are not in the Sinai Peninsula today. Human remains have also been found, such as this coral-covered femur bone on the right. Lab tests confirmed that it is in fact bone. Other bones have also been found. A cross-section reveals the bone inside the coral. Here we see a chariot wheel standing on its axle in this old 1978 footage shot by Ron Wyatt. Next, we see an 8-spoke wheel with 1 spoke missing. 8-spoke wheels were only used during the 18th dynasty, the time of the Exodus. The premier find here at the crossing site is this gold veneer that was left behind from a 4-spoke chariot wheel. The Bible tells us there were 600 choice chariots used in the chase of the children of Israel. This artifact was left behind at a depth of 200 feet. Since specialized equipment would be necessary to raise it to the surface, today it is still in the location where it was found. Since there are chariot parts on this side of the Red Sea crossing, could there be other chariot parts on the other side of the Gulf, showing a continuation of artifacts? On the shore opposite of Nuweiba, inspection of the seafloor in Saudi Arabia has also been conducted to see if chariot parts can be found on this side of the Red Sea crossing. While investigating the Saudi Arabian waters, Viveka Pontian found this beautiful round chariot wheel specimen with a raised center hub. This is confirmation of the chariot parts continuing to the other side of the crossing site, opposite Nuweiba. By confirming the location of the Red Sea crossing, one is then able to conclude without a doubt that the real Mount Sinai must be over in Saudi Arabia, in Midian, just as the Bible says.
In the spring of 2000, a robotic camera was lowered into these waters for the first time.
This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Mueller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with a remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at Nueva, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the sea floor. A slender, table-like structure, sometimes standing on end, with a coral-encrusted base, a straight shaft, and a circular top.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
In the midst of them, Pan Tien photographed this circular object attached to what appears to have been a broken axle or hub. This discovery was significant for two reasons. Pan Tien had documented the coral-encrusted form of a wheel with dimensions similar to ancient Egyptian artifacts, directly across from the proposed Nueva crossing site. Her find also provided independent confirmation of earlier evidence establishing wheel-like formations on both coasts of the Red Sea, in accordance with descriptions in the biblical record.
And the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army, and he made the wheels of their chariots come off.
For more than 20 years, divers and explorers from 3 continents, each intrigued by clues linking the Gulf of Aqaba and the biblical Yam Suf, have come to Nueva Beach seeking possible evidence of an Israelite crossing. Their search focused on the 600 chariots the Bible says were destroyed in the Red Sea. Inscriptions thousands of years old, and the few chariots recovered from ancient tombs, reveal much about the construction of these legendary vehicles of war. Could any of them actually be found on the seafloor off the Nueva Peninsula?
The first time I came to Nueva, the purpose was to verify, to document, and to establish hypotheses that this could be a link in the Exodus pathway.
Based on his analysis of documentary evidence, Leonard Muller had long suspected the Aqaba coast as the probable location of the Red Sea crossing. In 1997, he heard reports from other divers who claimed to have found unusual coral structures, some resembling the shapes of chariot wheels. Muller decided to investigate these claims for himself.
The first time I was diving there, of course, we were then looking for possible artifacts. And I had seen on some pictures what we could look for. I was skeptical and excited, because if this is the place for the crossing, then of course that's a big thing. So I was excited about that. But I was also skeptical because 3,500 years, that's a long time. But if Nueva is the crossing site, then of course you would expect to find remains of the Egyptian army.
Like others who had explored Nueva before him, Muller immediately recognized the difficulty of this search.
If we assume that a number of artifacts were spread out on the seabed, sooner or later corals would start to grow on them. And of course, if you have a number of layers of coral growing on something, it's very hard to distinguish the structure that was there from the very beginning.
Though the coral complicates any search here, it may have been instrumental in preserving the shapes of ancient artifacts. For coral is a living organism that will not begin to grow on a foundation of sand or silt. Instead, it must first attach itself to a solid object, where it will sometimes conform to the shape of its host.
So for instance, if it would grow on a wooden artifact, the wood would normally disappear in the seawaters after a time. But if you have corals growing on the wooden artifact, the coral could have the shape of the wooden artifact. And then the corals would consume the wooden material over periods of time, but still keep the shape of the wooden artifacts.
During the course of his explorations, Moeller observed that the pattern of coral growth at Nueva differed from other parts of the Gulf. Unlike the coral at the northern and southern ends of Aqaba, which often forms large, dense reefs, some covering many acres, the formations at Nueva Beach are generally smaller and scattered randomly across the sea floor. Divers familiar with the area have compared the distribution of coral here to a junkyard and the aftermath of a disaster. This description is fitting, and among the strange formations in these waters, many display features indicative of human engineering.
When we dive and when we film at the Nueva location, we look for certain structures, and you try to look for 90-degree angles or circular objects, wheel-like structures. So that is what you scan for, so to speak, when you dive. There are situations where you see something that looks like an axle, a hub, something that looks like a wheel, and you say to yourself, this is not a coral reef, this is a coral growth on an artifact. And that is what's different to me when I compare corals at other locations around the world.
Since the earliest explorations at Nueva, one distinctive type of formation has often been identified on the sea floor. A slender, table-like structure, sometimes standing on end, with a coral-encrusted base, a straight shaft, and a circular top.
It's a 90-degree angle, a right angle, between something that looks like an axle and the wheel. And you can see this in different varieties, and it looks very different from normal coral growth. And it is like a man-made structure with a coral growth on it.
While most of the possible artifacts found off the coast of Nueva are covered with coral, one significant discovery was not.
There is one find at the Nueva location that is of great interest, and that is the gilded wheel. It is a wooden basic structure of the wheel and is covered with gold, or electrum. It's a mixture of silver and gold. And corals have not been able to grow on it. It's been very well preserved. Although it's very fragile, it seems like the wooden content has been dissolved. So I mean, you could break it if you would try to remove it.
After its discovery, the fragile wheel-shaped veneer was photographed, then left in place on the sea floor. Later analysis revealed that its dimensions and design resembled four-spoke chariot wheels painted on an 18th dynasty tomb wall near the biblical date of the Exodus. After reviewing photographic evidence and making several dives of his own, Moeller concluded that a more systematic investigation of the Nueva seafloor was warranted. He realized that the limited diving time afforded by scuba equipment would never allow an extensive search of the area. A higher level of technology was necessary, and in the spring of 2000, the Discovery Media team lowered a robotic camera into these waters for the first time.
This has never been done. No one have been in the area at all with a remote control camera.
Controlled from the ship, the camera was maneuvered across the seafloor, transmitting video images for study and evaluation.
We have been down to some 80-90 meters, so we can go deeper down that we can't do with ordinary diving, and we can be down as long as we like.
As in his previous searches at Nuweiba, Moeller scrutinized the coral for specific shapes.
You can see that because it's a 90-degree angle. You see the seabed here, there are some structures that are just a little bit above the surface of the seabed. They have a cross-like appearance, it's 90-degree angles, and there's a hole in the middle.
So the hub would be here?
Possibly a hub there, yeah. And the wheel would be a circle around.
This would be the rim of the wheel here?
Yeah.
Okay. So this could be a spoke here, possibly?
Yeah,
possibly a spoke?
Yeah.
What would the diameter of that rim be?
It's a good question, but we would expect it to be about 1 meter, about 3 feet wide.
Okay.
In diameter.
The robotic camera's survey revealed many shapes and objects familiar to Moeller, including coral formations with right angles, arches, discs, and straight shafts fused into larger masses that had the appearance of twisted wreckage.
Now, when we have been able to go back and forth with a remote control camera, we can repeatedly see that these strange structures we are looking for are there. Not at one place, but you see them again and again and again. And this could be the outer rim of a wheel going around like
The abundance of these unusual coral structures was even more apparent when tapes of the expedition were carefully scrutinized during the months following the search at Nuweiba.
a wheel here, standing on the seabed. When you sit and look at these films that has been taken by the remote camera, you see all these strange artifacts or coral growth on some artifacts or structures that appear repeatedly, time after time, at different locations at this spot. And you can sit there and think, well, what is this? This doesn't look like normal coral growth. And it is amazing to see that so many things and such large areas down there that are like a man-made structure.
While the robotic camera logged hours of video documentation, Viveka Pontien and other divers on a second research vessel used metal detectors to evaluate specific structures on the sea floor. Pontien and her colleagues realized that the wheels of many Egyptian chariots were often reinforced with bronze. They hoped to find evidence of the metal encrusted in coral. A scan of this formation indicated a circular metallic pattern around its edge, perhaps evidence of the broken rim of a chariot wheel. Other coral formations examined also contained fragments of metal. Viveka Pontien's interest in this research was heightened by a discovery she had made 3 years earlier, 8 miles due east of the Nuweiba Peninsula. During her stay in Saudi Arabia, Pontien not only searched for Mount Sinai, she also made several dives in an attempt to document evidence of the Egyptian army on the Saudi side of the Gulf.
And the Bible tells that Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore after they came across. So I figured there must be some stuff on the Saudi side. At one spot there is like a very shallow sort of land tongue going out in a straight angle towards Nuweiba. You tell it by the shift of the color of the water. You could see how it was turquoise far out, you know. So I thought this would be interesting for exploration, so we did some dives near to that.
The scattered, irregular coral formations on the Saudi side of Aqaba resemble those previously found off the Nuweiba Peninsula. In the midst of them, Pan Tien photographed this circular object attached to what appears to have been a broken axle or hub. This discovery was significant for two reasons. Pan Tien had documented the coral-encrusted form of a wheel with dimensions similar to ancient Egyptian artifacts, directly across from the proposed Nuweiba crossing site. Her find also provided independent confirmation of earlier evidence establishing wheel-like formations on both coasts of the Red Sea, in accordance with descriptions in the biblical record.
And the Lord looked down on the Egyptian army, and he made the wheels of their chariots come off.
A common question is, why didn't you bring up artifacts? And there are several answers to that. The best thing to do when you find something is just to keep it in position. Document it, but keep it in position. It's very easy to destroy anything. And the other thing, it's illegal to remove artifacts, but also you're not allowed to bring up any corals from the Red Sea.
While Egyptian environmental laws prohibit removal of any coral for scientific dating and analysis, photographic evidence may provide a link to the time of the Exodus. Scholars have recognized that the design of the chariot wheel can be used to identify specific periods in Egyptian history. In the waters of Aqaba, it appears that remnants of 4- and 6-spoke wheels have been discovered. These designs were used simultaneously only during Egypt's 18th dynasty and no later than about 1400 BC, a time frame that coincides closely to the biblical date of the Exodus. The discoveries made between Nuweiba Beach and Saudi Arabia have been fascinating, but they also raise some obvious questions. If God parted these waters, how could a large group of people, including the elderly and the very young, have walked across the Gulf of Aqaba?
And since we know that the Gulf of Aqaba is terribly deep, because there is a very deep section in the crust of the earth that goes from the Dead Sea through Gulf of Aqaba, down through the main part of the Red Sea and down into Ethiopia, and it's called the Rift Valley there.
The imposing terrain of the Great Rift Valley is evident in the towering mountains that line the Aqaba coast. They drop straight down into the sea, creating an underwater canyon more than a mile deep, a seemingly impassable divide, even if devoid of water. While surveying the subsurface topography of the Nuweiba crossing site, evidence was uncovered that could help explain how Israel walked from one coast to the other. At its deepest points, the Gulf of Aqaba plunges more than 5,500 feet. Yet the ocean floor off the coast of Nuweiba Beach rises up several thousand feet from this trench, creating a wide, flattened ridge that the Israelites could have crossed once the Red Sea was divided. Simulated to scale in this computer animation, The view of the Gulf south of the Nueva Peninsula is striking. A chasm, deeper than the Grand Canyon, extends more than 50 miles. Its steep shorelines stand in sharp contrast to the shallow grade of the gently sloping ridge that extends from Nueva Beach to Saudi Arabia. It is a ridge that resembles what the Old Testament prophet Isaiah once called a pathway through the mighty waters. The robotic camera was used to evaluate the physical characteristics of this undersea ridge for the first time.
It's just flat, extremely flat, and very wide. There are no corals, there are no pieces of rock, and we followed that far out in the Gulf of Aqaba. It got deeper and deeper, but it was very flat all the time. And the interesting thing is also that the material on the seabed is not mud, as it is in the Gulf of Suez or at other places. It's a thin layer of sand or silt. It is easy to walk on it if you take away the water, and there would be no limit to have an enormous amount of people there, except the water, of course, but that's not our problem. That's God took care of that.
Thus says the Lord, who makes a way through the sea and a path through the mighty waters. Come and see the works of God. He turned the sea into dry land, and they passed through on foot.
While the existence of an underwater ridge stretching from Nueva Beach to Saudi Arabia may make it easier to understand how the Israelites could have crossed the Aqaba Gulf, it does not explain the actual parting of these waters in the manner described by the writers of the Exodus account.
My understanding at Nueva is that if the water was removed so they could cross there, it is nothing that we could explain from a scientific point of view, period.
Well, if you look at the Red Sea crossing as it's described in the Bible, what you clearly see there is this situation where a wind has come up and has dried out the land for them to cross. But then there's this element where the waters have formed a wall to the left and the right of the Israelites as they pass through. And they say that 2 or 3 times, so it's quite clear in their memory that the waters were like a wall. And there's just no naturalistic explanation for something like that.
For those who accept the idea that God could have divided the Red Sea by performing a miracle, the lack of naturalistic explanation poses no difficulty. Scholars, however, have generally assumed that miracles are impossible because they violate the laws of nature. As a result, any document based on a miraculous event must be historically unreliable. This reasoning, though widespread, is not without opposition. Some scholars, including the late Oxford philosopher and writer C.S. Lewis, have noted that accounts of biblical miracles display features of genuine historical literature. Lewis, in particular, argued that miracles, properly understood, never violate natural law.
It is inaccurate to define a miracle as something that breaks the laws of nature. It doesn't. Laws of nature tell what will happen, provided there's no interference. A miracle is an interference with nature by a supernatural power. Miraculous elements in a biblical narrative do not, therefore, preclude its historicity.
C.S. Lewis believed that miracles are acts of God, and therefore entirely possible, if there is a God to take action.
If you assume that God doesn't exist, then miracles are impossible, of course. But if God does exist, then there's the possibility that miracles could have occurred. So when we're looking at the events in the Bible like this, we have to be objective when we come to the evidence. we have to look at the data and say, is it really clear enough that a miracle might have really occurred here? If we objectively look at the evidence then, and it really seems to lead in the direction of something miraculous, then we need to be open to that.
After more than a century of research, where does the body of available evidence for the Exodus now lead? Many archaeologists have attempted to trace the path of Israel's journey to Mount Sinai. The routes they have most frequently proposed have yielded little or nothing in the way of actual confirmation. Yet today, another theory for the Israelites' path, far different from traditional ideas, may provide a trail of direct evidence for both a miracle and the historical validity of the Exodus account. Beginning in northeastern Egypt, Egyptian records and archaeological excavations document the presence of a Hebrew slave population several centuries prior to the probable time of the Exodus. Evidence also shows that the Hebrews later appeared in Canaan, the Promised Land, after centuries of bondage. Historical documents and possibly archaeological evidence locate the Mountain of God in northwest Arabia, the site of biblical Midian. And a trade route leading to Midian, intersected by a system of riverbeds terminating at the Aqaba coast, matches biblical and historical descriptions of the Israelites' path to the Red Sea. There, in the waters off Nuweiba Beach, structures resembling 18th dynasty chariot wheels lie embedded in coral on an elevated ridge that connects the Sinai and Arabian peninsulas.
So then you have a lot of things that you can put together to build a picture, like a puzzle. And we find artifacts, and we find geography, locations, and surroundings, so to speak, around this that fits the text very well.
Well, a good scientific theory explains a lot of evidence very simply and coherently. And there's a pattern that's coming out of this evidence that really suggests that the biblical record has a lot more historical content to it than what scholars have been willing to grant in the past. So the question no longer is, why don't we find any evidence for the Exodus? But instead, what do we do with this evidence that we now have that clearly seems to support the biblical record?
The scriptures tell us that nearly 3,500 years ago, God parted the waters of the Red Sea and led the Israelites to freedom. Did it happen here? Did it happen at all? Is the biblical description factually accurate? As with any historical investigation, we may never know with absolute certainty, and so perhaps belief in the Exodus will always require a measure of faith. But facts and faith need not conflict, as recent discoveries suggest. For history and archaeology have now uncovered compelling reasons to reconsider the extraordinary claims of the Exodus story.